I can actually take hold of what happened to me and put forth that energy doing something else that can help other women or girls or boys or anybody or the transgendered community or anybody that's going through something that I've been through, and that I'm still smiling, and that I'm still strong, and I'm still a powerful woman somewhere in there that can transcend, some sort of physical violence like that I'm a living example of it.
Mae Flores, one of the boldest women I know. You continue to be an inspiration to me, and I am so honored that you have agreed to come on the show today to tell us your story.
Thank you so much, Jannelle. And I'm also honored that I am speaking to you again.
It's National Women's Month, where we honor the strength of women. And when I think about the strength of women, one of the first few women that come to mind is you. You had been violated physically twice, once when you were 18 and another time in your 30s. I'd hate to do this, but for just as a backgrounder, can you tell us a bit about those experiences?
Sure. It's easy for me to tell you this story because I know you pretty well, but you know, I was 18 years old the first time it happened, still living at home. My family took a trip on Christmas Eve, like Christmas break, and we went on a cruise to the Caribbean. And I remember, it's exciting when your family can take you away, for the holidays. And I'll never forget, there was a formal dinner. So you're in a dress. They encourage you to dress up. I was in a gown with my whole family, had dinner. And there's kind of a teen group, and you kind of hang out with teens your age because you're in a boat, there's not much activity for young people. So we made a couple friends, and I remember right before midnight, I would say probably an hour and a half or so, or an hour. I can't, the time is really hazy. I remember telling my sister, I'm going to go change to jeans or something. I can't be in a dress the whole time. I'm uncomfortable. And I remember, I'll be right back. Totally normal. I remember walking, down the hall, and it was busy. And then as you get to the hall, it kind of separates. And I remember seeing the room and the door. There's a key card. You put it in, and but I really didn't anticipate somebody following me. And I was hit in the back of my head and pushed in, and I was sexually assaulted for the first time in that situation. And to be honest, I don't. I think about it now. It feels like it happened to somebody else because I've told the story, a lot of times now in different audience with different audiences. And so, you kind of look back and say, oh, did that really happen to me? Yeah, that was me. That was my story. And you make a movie in your head of these experiences, right?
I can only imagine how difficult it is. Backtracking a little bit, when you were 18 and it happened, what was your initial reaction? I have so many questions right now. What was your initial reaction?
Mhm.
Did you tell your family? When did you tell your family? Did you report it? Because we're hearing that people that find themselves in this situation really would rather not talk, especially Asian women, right?
Especially Asian
And
women.
then did they ever find the guy?
No, no. So being 18, I immediately blamed myself. I didn't have all the tools, right, to process that. You immediately go to shame and blamed yourself. I must have been scandalous. We were swimming, it was a trip. So I immediately blamed myself. I remember thinking, you deserve this. You aren't the good girl you were raised to be, the good Catholic Filipino girl you were raised to
Guilt,
be.
shame.
Yeah, there was a lot of guilt, a lot of shame. And we were, when you're a teenager, you don't really think about, that I'm allowed to be, a vibrant woman of color. You're not thinking of any of these things. And so I remember just internalizing everything. I wrote in my journal, and that's how my family found out, is that they noticed changes in me because I didn't share immediately. It took
Right.
time.
After
Yeah.
the fact. Right, right. Okay.
So after years, went to college, lived life, Wasn't always the smoothest, because you're dealing with a lot. And at the same time, you're trying to forget. I remember taking martial arts. I remember saying, if that happened to me again, I'll know what to do now. I'm strong. I became a parent. I went through a divorce. I was already starting to act. We had already met. I moved back to Chicago. And that was when that happened. And I remember going to Chicago and met up with a friend. And I remember being asked, do you want me to walk you to your car? By then I'm a mom of two, right? And a single mom of two, divorced and independent. By then, traveled and lived life. Thought I could handle it. And when he asked me to walk me to my car, I said, no worry. It's right out there. I don't need any help. And then the next thing I knew, I was hit again on my back and was dragged into a nearby park in the dark, and I feel like I blacked out, and I woke up and I was cold. And I remember thinking, well, what just happened to me? It's like my brain just shut down, and I didn't fight the way I trained myself to and took classes for. I didn't scream. I didn't do anything. It's like everything I learned or told myself I would never do again happened again. It was a shock. And I remember thinking, the only thing I need to do right now is just get home to my kids. And that's the only thing. And I don't think I'm so grateful I had kids, Jannelle, because I don't think I would have survived that second time. First time and then again. I mean, I was starting to think like, am I just prone to these kinds of attacks, these kinds of violence? You start to really think, like, what have I done? What about me? What about my character? What about how I present myself allows somebody to do that? And so I said, you know what? I can continue feeling sorry for myself, or I can move on with my life and finally use this as a message and listen carefully and change the trajectory of how my life's going to be. And so I said, I'm going to use with whatever little influence I have, and I'm going to do something about this so this won't happen to anybody else. So I said, I'm going to use my voice. So I used whatever influence I had with acting and all of that to finally meet certain people and that's how I got connected with the UN and UN Women. I literally just used whatever. I'm an actress. I left acting and I really want to start pursuing nonprofit and working with young women and girls. And now it's expanded to men and young men and bringing awareness to sexual assault. And then it just grew. And the next thing you know, I was invited to speak in certain venues at the UN and UN Women. And then it became like this big thing. And it became my life, was then to start speaking. And the TEDx talk that you saw, that was when I really told my story for the first time publicly. And then after that, it just grew. And now I sit, in circles where I have a little bit of influence, and it feels like I can actually take hold of what happened to me and put forth that energy doing something else that can help other women or girls or boys or anybody, or the transgender community, or anybody that's going through something that I've been through, and that I'm still smiling, and that I'm still strong, and I'm still a powerful woman somewhere in there that can transcend, some sort of physical violence like that I'm a living example of it. But at the same time, it's heavy. And, you hear a lot of stories and people that never shared their story with anybody else. So I've been speaking with like people who are in the geriatric community or our AAPI communities, and really hearing stories of not coming out and all of that. So that's the long way around how I got to this world, right? And how I shared all these messages.
And to the TEDx talk that I saw, you're still here. And you're not just still
Mhm.
here, meaning you're not just living or surviving, you're actually thriving and helping others to thrive.
Yeah.
I want to make mention when you said earlier that at 18 you blamed yourself. Just for the benefit of the viewers that are
Mhm.
watching, it's never the victim's fault,
No,
right? Yes,
no.
we want to make that clear. It's never the victim's fault. But at the same time, I know that people who survive something tragic like this, you don't see yourself as the victim.
Not anymore,
When
right?
did
You
you?
don't see yourself as the victim. It took time to and a lot of work with myself. And even still so, you're still haunted with the guilt of I could have done things differently, right? But I don't allow myself. I
Mhm.
at least I know to stop it now. But that took a lot of therapy and a lot of hearing other people's stories to really learn how not to blame myself. And women will always blame themselves. Victims always will go there first.
Right.
I wish we all had the toolkit to be able to, just say, this was not my fault. I'm going right now to report it. There are so many unreported cases, Janelle. As you know, you've been in the world of, even with the whole Me Too movement and all of that. We've all seen how women and victims just go straight to, I shouldn't have put myself in that situation. I shouldn't have dressed that way. I shouldn't have flirted. I shouldn't have. You can still be who you are, and I feel like we play now because of all of these things. We're working so hard backwards to
Mhm.
backpedal from so much of the things that we're conditioned to learn
Right.
as kids.
So when it happened the second time around, was that a different reaction? Did you react differently than the first time? Because you were, older, more mature.
I immediately blame myself. It happened again. What did you do differently? Didn't you learn from the first time around? What were you doing not taking him up on walking you to your car? You know better. So you go through these self blames, but then the benefit of having kids, Janelle, you're a mom of two gorgeous kids too, is that you're like, I have to go home now. I can't show them. What would I do differently this time now that I have kids? I will admit it took me time to go to the hospital. I
Mhm.
remember I waited most of the day, the following day, because this was night. I remember waiting the whole day. And
Right,
it took me so long to finally say, I'm going to go. I'm going
right.
to go to the hospital and do it differently and do a rape kit this time and report it. I'm proud of the fact that I was strong enough to report it, but they never found him. Um, they never found him. The rape kit is floating around somewhere. Um, there were a couple opportunities, to see if, they did a stand. Yeah, they
Right.
right. And the police called and said, would you like to take a look and maybe see if any of these individuals could have been that? And they had them talk to me because I couldn't remember what the voice sounded like. All I know is hoodie. It felt like a hoodie, or they're little pieces that you remember, and then never recognized anything. And then I said, "What if it was one of these guys
Mhm.
on the lineup that they showed me?" And I didn't know. You start blaming yourself. How do you not remember these things?
Mhm.
But then eventually, City of Chicago Police Department just it kind of dissipated,
Mhm. Mhm.
and the rape kit is in storage. It's not a priority. I'm alive, so it's not a priority. I mean, there are thousands of rape kits that are not tested. It's just sitting there because we're survivors. So we're like, oh, not murders or not this or not that. There's priorities bigger, and I agree that there are much greater things that are happening, but these things continue to happen and these assaulters continue to walk and continue to do what they do. So there's a lot of work with reform that needs to be made for sure in that way.
And in this advent of like the Me Too movement and all that, people now being more aware, and it's not just the women that are being violated, right? We want to make that clear. For the purpose of
Yes.
this interview, of our interview with you, highlighting the strength of a woman, right? Um, Do you think things could have changed if it happened now? What happened to you then, in the light of all this movement of like courage, bringing out the courage in women and all that stuff?
I know I tend to joke with my girlfriends or with people that are close to me that, oh, I wish this happened now that I started speaking out and I have a larger platform to express my feelings and people pay more attention. Is that if it happened now, I feel sorry for the person. I definitely would approach it differently if it were to occur that way again, whether it's sexual or just, I mean, we're at an era right now where, Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders are being murdered, are
Mhm.
being assaulted, and for no reason whatsoever.
Yes, yes, yeah. Attack violently, especially now with this movement with Stop Asian Hate and all that.
Right. And there's a part of me that's scared, but then there's a part of me that says, I hope you do, because I will be very different this time. I will be very this. I have a larger platform. People pay more attention, but not everybody has the benefit
Mhm,
of transitioning like I did.
mhm,
I'm so fortunate to have had people that, accepted me and listened. There's so many that tell their story and that don't have the support, you know, publicly or even in families.
yes. So, for people that are watching, or for the victims that have gone through the same experiences or a similar experience, that are afraid to come out, they're afraid to tell their story, what benefit will they get?
Well, there's obviously the benefit of it being fresh, the experiences of violation that they may have experienced, right? Timing is everything in catching someone, right? But I also encourage people to not put so much pressure on themselves to feel like they have to do it now. And they have to, everybody will do it at their own time. I feel
Mhm,
that everybody, even if you never say anything, and maybe you told a close friend once, that is your choice.
mhm,
And you are not in any way going to be, or shouldn't be, we hope, looked down upon for waiting and taking the time to heal yourself and finding that voice to do it. Not everybody has that benefit ever,
because
really.
you found your voice. What pushed you to say something?
I think my boys,
Mm,
my kids,
mhm,
I really do think that, I didn't want them to be in a home where people told the secrets.
mhm,
I didn't want them to see their Asian Islander mom, Filipino mom, continuing the cycle of not sharing terrible experiences like this. Because if something happened to them, Jannelle, or, I would hate for them to say, like, I didn't know I could talk about it. I want them to have the empowerment, male or female, to come forward with whatever experience bothers them.
mhm,
I don't want there to have to be a stigma in my household, and that's what I think kept me going, is that I didn't want it to be a secret. Because there are times when my kids are now teens, right? And I think to myself, they can look online and they know their mom has spoken about violence in many degrees of seriousness and intensities. And are they embarrassed that their mom started speaking? I've
mhm.
never shared this with anyone before. I can't believe it. Are they embarrassed with their mom
Right.
for being so forthright about her experience? Because that's not what we're supposed to do, is be so open like that. We're raised to, you know, to,
Sweep it under the rug.
yeah, just
Mhm,
move on with your life. Let's not bring attention to ourselves, which is kind of ironic. And I want to tie this to the violence that, our communities are experiencing, is because we don't even like to cause waves.
yes.
So, and where the silencing of our communities is, this is what we grew up with, which is ironic that the violence is coming in our direction because we don't like to be brought
But
and
that's
highlighted.
but I think that's probably why. Because in our culture we don't fight back. We just like, we try to cause as little trouble as possible, right?
Right.
But to your point, that's also the strength of a mom.
Yeah.
So how did you explain this to your boys? and I'm assuming that you have. And
Mhm.
how are you raising them differently?
Oh my gosh. I remember when I knew I was going to be doing the TED Talk, and I had to tell them it's going to be publicized,
Mhm.
right? And so I pulled them aside and said, this is what happened to mom. And I remember my oldest, Asher, at the time was, I think, 12 or 13. And he just
Broke down.
got emotional for me
Mhm.
because, it's just, that's a lot for a kid to have to identify their mother as. And I don't want that to be all of me. And it's hard to see me as anything but, because I also speak about it so often.
Mhm.
And so that becomes a platform that people see me and they say, oh, this is what her topics are about now. And so I didn't want my kids to see me constantly as this victim, although I know inadvertently they will, as my poor mom, and how we were here when this happened the second time. And so a lot of talking and encouraging them to ask questions is always a big thing. I always told them, you can ask me anything. Clearly I'm an open book to
Mhm.
strangers, let alone my boys. So I said, just ask me anything, and just remember that this is not how we treat our partners or strangers in general. And that is what I hope that they carry on into their lives now, especially, with Asher starting to look at colleges and growing up, and, you know, as he leaves into the world, and as Jonathan Lee, continues to grow, I want them to know that they can speak out. I think that's the biggest thing I want them to learn, and the biggest takeaway of my experience. It'll make it worth it if I know that they can come to me or go to people that they trust and love and say something happened to me.
Right.
That'll be the biggest gift for me. Not that I expect those things to happen, but the world isn't as
Okay.
safe as
Yeah.
we want it to be for our children. So I hope that if there's one thing they learned from me, it would be that they can talk about anything that makes them feel unsafe.
How do we empower women? What would you say to them as somebody who's fought her life or almost your whole life and now still fighting, advocating?
I need people to remember to really focus on allowing yourself to be vulnerable with yourself.
Mhm.
We don't have to be these powerful, strong, what the definitions of, like heroes. And
Mm.
and I think the minute that we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, really vulnerable, and say, I'm gonna let myself cry all day today.
Mhm.
Now I'm aware. Tomorrow I move forward. And I don't think we do that enough
Right.
in our lives.
Right. You know what that is? Self-care, which brings me
Oh
to
my
the
gosh, it's
summary of everything that we've talked about. Um, we women are superheroes because of the three S's as well that you pointed out: speaking out, self-talk, the way we talk to ourselves, and self-care, the way we take care of
right.
ourselves. Yes.
Oh, that's so true. I love that. Look at you with your nuggets.
What's on the horizon for you?
I'm starting a talk show through the network Chicago for Real, and it's going to be available online for anybody every week. On Sundays is going to be the show I'm Still Here, stories of survival from everyday people like you and me.
But thank you so much for now. God bless you on your journey, and we will be here cheering you on.
Thank you, Jannelle. And I'm so honored. And thank you so much for being, brave enough to highlight a story like this. Because I know it's not an easy story to put out there. So I'm so honored that you even considered it for International Women's Day. It means so much to me.